Co-authored, if you will, by Rock Hudson and Sara Davidson. Rock Hudson was a product of the Hollywood star system. The 6'4" actor was usually cast as the ruggedly handsome male, the romantic lead. Audiences adored him. Off-screen, his life, however, was cloaked in secrecy, concealing the fact that he was a homosexual and was for 30 years. His story is co-authored by Sara Davidson, who met with him only for 1 month before his death. So, Sara, there is some controversy about how much he could possibly have contributed to this story. When you met him, how sick was he?
When I first met him, which was on September 4th of last year, we met in his house, and he was perfectly lucid, even though he was very sick. He was downstairs. We sat together in his living room. His mind was not gone. He was sharp. He made jokes. He was full of vinegar. And we had a tape recorder going, and I made notes. And the first thing I said to him was, "Why do you want to do this book?" And he said, "So much junk has been written about me that it's time to set things straight. It's time to tell the whole story."
He wanted to tell the truth, and that it means about his homosexuality.
He wanted to tell the truth about his life, including his homosexuality, and he wanted to raise money for AIDS. Now, he knew that he wasn't going to have endless time. So he asked his closest friends, his secretary and friend of 35 years, Mark Miller, his other friend, George Nader, who had known him 30 years, Tom Clark, who had lived with him for 10 years. He asked them to cooperate and work with me after he was gone. And we wrote up a letter that he sent to all of his other close friends, asking them to work with me, and to work with me exclusively, because this was going to be Rock's book, and it was going to be the book that would raise money directly for AIDS research.
He was anything but a gay activist. So why this transformation to someone who wanted to raise money for AIDS, when for most of the time he had AIDS, he was denying to others, or even perhaps to himself, that he had it?
I think Rock was stunned at the end of his life when the secret that he had been protecting with all his strength was revealed, that instead of being scorned and humiliated as he had expected, he received this outpouring of warmth and love and support. He got 30,000 letters from all over the world in 2 weeks, and what people said was, "We don't care about your private life. That's your own business. We love you and are praying for you." And I think the lesson of Rock's life was that withholding the truth can have devastating consequences.
And yet for 30 years it allowed him to be one of Hollywood's biggest screen idols. When he came to Hollywood in the 50s, how was it to be homosexual?
Well, in 1948, when Rock got here, there was no word gay. There was no gay pride. Homosexuals were fairies or queers that were shunned and ridiculed. And Rock knew that if he was going to make it as a big star, he had to present a masculine image without a suggestion of softness. Now, how would you feel if your favorite actor or actress, the one who makes your heart flutter when you see that person on the screen, if someone told you that that person was gay? And I think most women would have difficulty seeing that person in a romantic light after that. So Rock led this very carefully guarded double life.
And yet it was a very active double life. I mean, it's not as if he denied to himself that he was homosexual.
No, he would go out to premieres and parties with beautiful women, and they would be photographed dancing cheek to cheek, and he'd take her home in the limousine, and then he'd go back to the man he lived with. He always had 2 phone lines in his house, and Rock's companion would never answer Rock's phone. He was careful not to go out in public with too many boys. You know, sometimes a group would be gathered in somebody's house, and someone would say, "Let's go out for pizza," and they'd look around and say, "Nope, too many boys, let's order in." Now, this is all the more ironic when you think about what Rock Hudson and Doris Day meant to us in 1959.
Let me stop there. He did seem to have women friends to whom he was devoted, and Doris Day may be at the top of the list or near the top. Did she know?
When I interviewed Doris, she said, "It was hard for me to believe." She said, "I got the same readings from him that I got from James Garner or anybody else that I worked with." And I also heard this from Susan St. James, who was his co-star in Macmillan and Wife. She said, "I could hug Rock and get goosebumps. There was nothing that told me I couldn't go all the way to home plate with him."
There was so much chemistry between he and many of his leading ladies.
Well, Rock was bisexual. You see, I think a lot of us have this misconception that you're either gay or straight. But when Kinsey did his studies of male sexuality in 1948, he said that it's not either or. There's a continuum. And at one end of the spectrum are men who are exclusively gay, and at the other end are men who are exclusively straight, and that most men are somewhere in between.
Did he tell you that, or did you deduce that?
Well, I had the privilege of reading Rock Hudson's very own copy of that Kinsey report, and he had read it very carefully when it first came out and discussed it with all of his friends, and I think it was very gratifying to him because for the first time, a straight person and a respected scientific observer came out and validated it. They said this is not a disease, it's perfectly natural, it has occurred from the beginnings of time, and that we would be better off encouraging people
Was he
who are
ever
gay.
tormented by that fact, or was he comfortable in his sexuality?
I think he was very comfortable with it. I think that he had some inkling that he was gay from as early as age 9.
So, the question that, I don't know, do you know the answer to this? He married Phyllis Gates, his agent's secretary. Was it a real marriage or a phony marriage?
Now, this is the central mystery of Rock's life. He told many of his friends that he really loved Phyllis and that he was devastated when they broke up. He told other people that he was forced to marry her and he was bitter about it. Now, Phyllis Gates herself isn't sure what the truth was. She told me, "I used to think my marriage started with good intentions, but now I'm not sure that it was genuine. Rock charmed women, and I think he used me. I don't think he loved me, and I wish I could find out who arranged it." Now, to me, one of the saddest things is that from what I've been able to learn, Rock could never tell her that he was bisexual. She had heard rumors that he was gay, and he had lived with men before he married her, but they never discussed it. He had to pretend with his own wife. Now, you can't build a marriage on an omission like that.
You can build an acting career on an ability like that. Well, we'll talk more with Sara Davidson tomorrow. Our talk today with writer Sara Davidson, whom he asked shortly before he died to help him write a book. And that book is Rock Hudson, his story. And welcome back, Sara.
Thank you.
All right, in Hollywood, if not generally, Rock Hudson's homosexuality was known. And yet, when the announcement came that he was dying of AIDS, that stunned even Hollywood, didn't it?
It did. There had been some vague rumors that he had AIDS, but nobody wanted to believe it. It was too terrible. And he received his diagnosis in June of 1984, and he decided he would keep absolutely silent. He would tell almost nobody. He only told 3 people in the whole world besides his doctors. His secretary, Mark Miller, George Nader, who lived with Miller, and Dean Dittman, an actor friend, and he told nobody else because he wanted to keep working, and he felt if they know I have AIDS, I'll never work again.
Much has been said, as you know, about the fact that he kept his secret even from Linda Evans in what is now a very well-known episode of Dynasty. He did agonize over that kiss, didn't he?
Yes, he didn't know when he agreed to do Dynasty that he was going to have to kiss Linda. And when he got the script, he walked into the kitchen where his secretary was sitting, and he threw the script on the table and said, "I've got to kiss Linda. What am I going to do?" And for a week he agonized. He thought, do I run to my doctors and say, there's a kiss, what do I do? Do I tell Linda and the producers? He felt he couldn't ask them to change a script, that it would arouse too much suspicion.
So to cover himself, he didn't tell her or anybody else.
He felt either you announce you have AIDS or you kiss the lady.
What about his last young live-in lover, Mark Christian? I understand there is a lawsuit pending. You deal with in the book, though, the fact that he did not tell Mark Christian that he was suffering from AIDS. Why not?
Well, this is hard to understand. What I have tried to do is to imagine what Rock thought and felt in this situation by talking to the people who were closest to him and shared his secret. Now, they felt that Rock was terrified, for good reason or not, that Christian would tell other people and spread the news. He didn't trust Christian. They had been estranged for some time.
And yet Christian was still living on the grounds.
Yes. They rarely spoke. One of Rock's friends said he exuded a cold loathing toward Christian. Rock was not the kind of person who could confront people. He couldn't say to somebody, I want you to leave. He would freeze them out. He would go silent, and he would hope that they would get the message and leave, but Christian didn't.
You had exactly 1 month of days with Rock Hudson. Were you able to ask him direct questions like, when did you accept knowing you were dying of AIDS? Or any number of really blunt questions? Or were you trying to be careful with a dying man?
I was trying to be careful. So we started out with what I felt were harmless questions about his career, why he wanted to act, how he felt about Doris Day, the comedies. And I was saving the others until I felt a relationship of trust was built up. Unfortunately, the whole Christian lawsuit didn't come up until Hudson had died, and I wasn't able to ask him about that.
And how many other questions?
Yes,
unable?
I wish I had, if we'd had just a few more months.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to get so many intimate, poignant moments. I think one of the most moving points in the book is when Hudson collapsed in Paris last summer. The news was released that he had AIDS. He was told that he had just a few days left to live, and he said, "I want to die in my own bed." So an airplane was rented to fly him home, and he was given a sedative, so he was asleep all the way in the ambulance into the plane. And when he woke up, he looked around, and he saw a French woman who was his publicist, and he said, "Where am I?" And she said, "Rock, you're in a plane. In a few minutes, you'll be flying home." And he said, "Where's Mark? Where's my secretary?" And she said, "He had to stay behind to pay bills. He's not here." And Rock said, "Well, are you coming with me?" And she said, "No, I can't." And Rock looked around. He was alone on a deserted jumbo jet. The doctor and nurse didn't speak English. He was dying, and he started to cry. And the woman leaned over and kissed him and took his hand, and he looked at her and said, "You're really not afraid to touch me?" And I think it was such an irony that this man, who all his life people had been fighting to get near him and touch him and get a piece of him, at the very end of his life, he'd become an untouchable.